here in Crypto.com Arena. Between the Sparks and Caitlin Clark and the Fever. Clark with 11 to go along with her game-high 6 assists.
She was dominating the game. 24 points on the board, 9 assists, her team up by 14, playing some of the best basketball of the young 2026 season. And then a referee decided that was the exact right moment to hand Caitlin Clark a technical foul. Not for throwing something, not for putting her hands on an official, not for anything that comes close to crossing a real line in professional basketball. She walked up to referee Jason Alabanza, clapped her hands, looked him in the eye, and told him exactly what she thought of the call he had just made. And he issued a technical foul against a player who was winning, against a player who had just helped Indiana build a 14-point lead over the Los Angeles Sparks, against a player who has now had this exact conversation with league officials, with the media, and with the public for 2.5 straight professional seasons without anything meaningfully changing. The Indiana Fever still won the game, 87-78. Caitlin Clark finished with 24 points and 9 assists. The box score looked clean. The headline looked fine. But the story underneath that box score is anything but clean. And if you have been paying attention to this league at all over the past 2 years, you already know exactly why. We're going to break down absolutely everything that happened at Crypto.com Arena on May 13th. The technical foul and what actually triggered it. The referee behind it. The 2-year officiating pattern that keeps following Clark like a shadow. The financial stakes that have quietly changed what every one of these moments now costs players. And a serious, honest conversation about whether the offense the Indiana Fever are running is actually built to make Caitlin Clark the best version of herself, or whether something more complicated and more troubling is happening right in front of everyone. If this is your kind of deep dive sports breakdown, hit that subscribe button right now, because this channel does not do surface level takes. We go all the way in. Let's get into it. With 20 seconds remaining in the first half, Clark was called for an offensive foul. The Sparks got possession back. Debatable call. Bad timing. But it happens in basketball. That is not the story. What happened next is the story. As the officials reviewed the play, ESPN's broadcast picked up Clark, visibly frustrated, yelling in the direction of the referees. That's just rude. Unbelievable. The review finished. The final seconds of the half were ticking down. Clark, instead of walking straight to the visiting locker room, made a detour. She walked toward Alabanza. She clapped. She got close enough to make eye contact and said what she needed to say. And Alabanza, right there at the end of the half, issued a technical foul. Now here is the piece of this that makes the whole thing so much more layered than it first appears. Before she walked over to him, Alabanza had already let one earlier exchange go. She had expressed frustration. He had processed it, and he had decided once that it did not rise to the level of a technical. And she kept talking. She moved toward him. She clapped in his face, and he changed his mind. Every professional basketball player alive understands what that means. When you move toward an official and close the physical gap between you, you are rolling the dice. That is not a secret rule hidden somewhere in the fine print. It is one of the most understood, unwritten laws of professional basketball. Clark knows it. She has 9 career technical fouls. She has been through this enough times to know exactly where that invisible line sits. So the conversation that night was never about Clark being unaware. It was about Clark deciding that what she had just witnessed, the call, the sequence, the pattern it fit into, was worth the risk of saying something anyway. That is a different conversation entirely, and that is the conversation the league still refuses to have. What made this moment hit differently than a random in-game frustration is the context. She was not spiraling. She was not out of control after a bad night. She was dominating the game. 11 points and 6 assists at halftime. The Fever up 14. Indiana closing the second quarter on a scorching 18-5 run that showed exactly what this offense looks like when everything is clicking. And she walked over to that official in the final seconds of the half, not because she was falling apart, but because she had been at the top of her game all night and still ended up on the wrong end of a call she believed was wrong. That context matters more than people are giving it credit for. 9 career technical fouls. 6 in her rookie season, 2 in an injury-shortened 2025, and now 1 to open 2026. Let that number sit with you for a moment. 6 technical fouls in her very first professional season. In 2024, having never played at this level before, still adjusting to the pace and the physicality and the way officiating works in a professional league, Caitlin Clark accumulated 6 technical fouls, one away from a mandatory 1-game suspension. Her own coaching staff publicly told reporters she needed to be better in those moments, needed to move on faster, needed to let the emotion pass more quickly. And in fairness to everyone involved, she tried. The following season, limited to fewer games because of injury, she picked up 2 more. The count kept climbing. Now in 2026, barely into the new season, the same story is already on the board. 9 total technicals across 2.5 seasons is not a noise statistic. It is a signal. And the question that nobody in an official position seems willing to answer directly is this. When you examine the specific circumstances under which these technical fouls have been called, the officials involved, the type of contact that preceded them, the situation on the floor when they occurred, does the threshold being applied to Caitlin Clark match the threshold being applied to every other player in this league? Because here is what the evidence has shown repeatedly. There's a well-documented, widely reported pattern of Clark absorbing significant physical contact on the basketball court without receiving the foul calls that the same physical treatment against other players would consistently generate. This is not a fringe opinion being pushed by anonymous social media accounts with an agenda. Major sports journalists, television analysts covering this league professionally, and Clark herself, in carefully worded post-game press conferences, have all acknowledged this reality. The contact is there. The whistles have often been slow to follow. And when Clark pushes back vocally on that treatment, she gets penalized for doing so. Think about what that dynamic actually looks like from her perspective. You are one of the fastest moving offensive players in the sport. You're taking contact on drives, screens, shooting motions. You watch other players at your position get to the free throw line in situations that look identical to what you just experienced. And the only recourse you have, the only voice you have in real time, is to say something to the referee standing 10 feet away. So you do, and you get a technical foul for it. You can call that a coincidence once. You can stretch it to twice. You cannot explain away 9 career technicals concentrated around a specific type of frustration about a specific type of officiating treatment and still claim there is no dynamic at play. That is not analysis. That is avoidance. The money side nobody is calculating. Here is where this story gets a dimension that barely anyone is covering properly. Because the financial landscape of the WNBA in 2026 is almost unrecognizable compared to just 1 year ago. And that changes everything about what these technical fouls actually cost. Under the WNBA's new collective bargaining agreement that took effect this season, the salary cap has climbed to $7 million. In 2025, that number was $1.5 million. Individual player salaries now start at $270,000, up dramatically from the $66,000 minimum that existed just 1 year ago. Those numbers are not a small adjustment. They represent a fundamental economic transformation of this league. Players who spent years being drastically underpaid relative to their value, relative to what they generated commercially, relative to what comparable professional athletes in other sports were earning, finally have salaries that begin to reflect their worth. That is long overdue and genuinely worth celebrating. But with those larger salaries comes a revised fine structure that has made every one of these technical foul moments significantly more expensive. Technical fouls now carry a $500 penalty each for the first 3 offenses of the season. That doubles to $1,000 per technical for fouls 4 through 7. And if a player reaches 8 technicals in a single season, the fine rises to $1,500 per incident, and they begin serving mandatory game suspensions. The financial consequences attached to these referee interactions have grown at the same pace as everything else in this league. Now compare that to what Clark was fined in 2025 for a social media post. She tweeted after a playoff win, while sitting injured in street clothes watching her team compete, something that referenced the officiating in a celebratory tone. The league fined her $200. $200 for a tweet. Clark responded publicly with laughing emojis and acknowledged the fine with exactly the tone you would expect from someone who found the whole thing slightly absurd. She said the words. She got $200 fine, and she let the world know she had an opinion about that. That was 2025. In 2026, the first technical foul of her season costs $500. and every one that follows is more expensive than the last. The stakes attached to these moments have risen dramatically, but the accountability structures on the other side of that equation, the transparency around how officials are assigned, the processes by which recurring patterns involving specific referees and specific players are identified and addressed, the public communication from the league when something controversial happens involving its most commercially significant player, none of that has grown in any visible, meaningful way. The WNBA is collecting more money from player fines. Players are making more to pay those fines. But the dynamic that keeps generating those fines has not been addressed with anything resembling serious institutional effort. That is a growing problem in a league trying to present itself as first class. What the box score is not telling you. Let us shift to the actual basketball, because there is a game story here that runs deeper than the officiating conversation, and it tells us something genuinely important about where this Indiana Fever team is and where it's still trying to get to. The final numbers looked strong. 87-78. Clark with 24 points and 9 assists. Kelsey Mitchell with 23 points. Sophie Cunningham contributing 12 points and 7 rebounds off the bench. Indiana shot the ball efficiently in crucial stretches, built a comfortable lead going into halftime, and had enough execution in the second half to hold on through a Sparks push late. On the surface, a winning performance. But there's a story inside those numbers that the raw stats do not fully surface. Clark went 9 for 17 from the field overall, which is a strong efficiency number. What that top-line figure obscures is where those makes came from and what they reveal about the design of this offense on a given night. Because the most interesting thing about Clark's 24 points was not how many she scored. It was how she got them. The driving game was present and genuinely impressive. Clark attacked the paint repeatedly in 2026 in ways she did not as consistently in her first 2 professional seasons. She got downhill, split defenders, and finished in traffic with a confidence and a creativity that represents real growth in her offensive toolkit. When she is driving and finishing alongside her long-range shooting, she becomes a categorically different problem for opposing defenses. You cannot just crowd her at the perimeter and dare her to drive. You cannot just give her space and gamble on her missing. Every adjustment of defense opens up a different layer of attack. That development is arguably the most exciting storyline in the entire WNBA right now. A Caitlin Clark who can hurt you in multiple ways simultaneously is a player who does not have a single reliable answer in any team's defensive playbook. And the fact that she showed those interior dimensions again in this game, on a night when the technical foul conversation was threatening to overshadow everything else, says a lot about her mental focus and competitive drive. But here's where things get complicated, because not everything about this offense is trending in the direction it needs to. The question Stephanie White must answer. Kelsey Mitchell is an elite basketball player. That is not up for debate, and nobody on this channel is here to take shots at her. In 2025, she averaged over 20 points per game, shot close to 46% from the field, and led the entire WNBA in three-pointers made. She earned every bit of her reputation as one of the premier scorers in this league. She's a legitimate co-star and a critical piece of what Indiana is building. But the question the film from this game raises is not whether Mitchell can score. The question is whose offense this truly is when everything is on the line. Mitchell had 17 points at halftime, 17 first-half points on a high volume of shot attempts. And she was finding those looks within the flow of the offense, in rhythm, off designed actions. That is a strong half by any measure. But here is the context that matters. Her co-star, the player who is by any commercial or statistical measure the most marketable figure in the history of women's professional basketball, had 11 points and 6 assists at the same halftime mark. 11 points and 6 assists is not a bad halftime. It is a good halftime. But 6 assists means the ball was leaving Clark's hands at a high rate and traveling to teammates who were finishing. And the question is, after it left her hands, how often was the offense designed to bring it back? Because there is a difference between being the engine of an offense and being the organizer of an offense. An engine drives the action. An organizer facilitates it. Both roles are valuable. But if your best offensive weapon is Caitlin Clark, and she is spending possessions creating advantages for others without the system reliably bringing the ball back to her after she initiates, then you're leaving production on the table every single night. What the film from this game shows, and this is not a hot take, but a straight reading of the action, is that the reintegration of Clark as a primary scoring option after she facilitates has been inconsistently present in these early 2026 games. She creates the first advantage. The defense scrambles. The ball swings. A teammate gets the touch, takes the shot, and the possession ends. And Clark is already sprinting back on defense without having gotten another opportunity to attack. That can look fine in a box score. It can result in a winning performance. But against a team with the defensive discipline to stay composed under that kind of pressure, against a Connecticut Sun or a New York Liberty or a Las Vegas Aces that has been built specifically to take away what your best players do best, that inconsistency becomes the margin of a playoff series. Stephanie White has publicly spoken about wanting Clark to operate across a wider area of the floor this season, to reduce the physical burden of bringing the ball up 94 feet every possession, to expand the range of actions she is involved in. That vision is the right one. The question is whether the full execution of that vision is consistently present yet. And this game suggested the answer is still not quite yes. The turnover problem nobody wants to talk about. 16 turnovers. Let that number breathe for a second. Indiana turned the ball over 16 times in a game against a Los Angeles Sparks team that entered the night without a win. The only reason that did not become a disaster is because the Sparks were even more careless, giving it away 19 times themselves and neutralizing most of the damage Indiana was doing to themselves. That is not strategy. That is surviving your own mistakes because your opponent was making more of them at the same time. That kind of luck does not replicate. The Indiana Fever cannot build toward a championship run on the assumption that every team they face will match their turnovers or exceed them. 16 turnovers against a disciplined, well-coached opponent, a team that converts off turnovers efficiently and punishes you in transition, does not end with an 87-78 final score. It ends with a loss by double digits and a post-game press conference full of uncomfortable questions. Turnovers break rhythm. They kill offensive momentum right at the moment your defense is most tired. They give opposing benches energy and opposing crowds life. And in a playoff environment, where the margin between winning and losing shrinks to the smallest possible increments, 16 turnovers against the top 4 seed is a series-ending number. There is simply no version of this team reaching its ceiling while that kind of ball security problem persists into the tougher months of the schedule. Now, fairness demands acknowledging what went right, because this channel does not just run the negative play. The free throw shooting in this game was excellent. Indiana shot at 87% from the line, and in a close professional game, that kind of efficiency is genuinely valuable. It is the kind of number that holds up in fourth quarter pressure situations. It tells you this team knows how to maintain composure when the game tightens and the moment gets bigger. That is a winning habit, and it deserves real credit. The rebounding was also improved compared to Indiana's season-opening loss to Dallas. The Fever out-rebounded the Sparks by 7 on the night, showing more physicality and more effort on the glass than they had in their first game. Those are real positives on a night full of complicated storylines. And the halftime run, 18-5 to close the second quarter, showed what this offense can look like when the movement is clean and everyone is reading the same action simultaneously. That is the kind of stretch that makes you believe this team has a genuine championship ceiling. The problem is making that stretch the standard, not the exception. Let us bring everything back to the biggest picture now, because everything we have discussed tonight, the technical foul, the officiating history, the financial penalties, the offensive identity questions, all of it exists inside a larger story about where the WNBA is and what it still needs to become. The league is experiencing real, historic growth. The salary cap jumping from $1.5 million to $7 million in a single offseason is not a modest adjustment. It is a statement about where this league believes it is heading. Players who spent years being paid a fraction of their actual market value now have contracts that begin to reflect what they generate commercially, athletically, and culturally. The WNBA's broadcast deals, its merchandise numbers, its attendance figures, its social media reach, all of it is at an all-time high. And a significant piece of that growth traces directly back to the moment Caitlin Clark walked into this league as a rookie in 2024 and brought with her a level of public attention women's basketball had never seen before. That is not a controversial statement. It is a fact reflected in television ratings, arena sellouts, merchandise sales, and the dramatic salary improvements that followed her arrival. Clark did not do that alone. The players and coaches and administrators who built this league over decades created the foundation. But Clark's arrival was the catalyst for a commercial acceleration that changed the economic math of the entire enterprise. And that is exactly why the ongoing officiating controversy around her has become a problem the league cannot continue to manage through silence. The WNBA cannot keep positioning itself as a first-class professional product while simultaneously allowing its most commercially significant player to sit at the center of recurring, documented officiating controversies and responding with nothing more substantive than a fine schedule and public quiet. The fans who are generating the revenue that funds the salary growth and the infrastructure expansion, those fans are paying close attention. They see these moments. They remember them. And they connect them to a larger feeling that something about the way Clark is treated inside the lines of the game has never quite been addressed. Social media after the Alabanza call lit up with the kind of fast, unified frustration that only surfaces when something touches a pre-existing nerve. Comments calling the official out by name. Fans referencing prior games involving the same referee. Reactions describing the technical as soft, as unnecessary, as part of a documented pattern. Social media outrage is not a legal document, and angry comment sections require proportion and context. But when the same specific complaints appear across multiple seasons, multiple officials, and multiple games, that is not noise anymore. That is data. And data in a league this size deserves an institutional response more serious than fine collection and radio silence. The WNBA has a real opportunity right now. While the momentum and the goodwill and the commercial growth are all moving in the right direction, to build officiating accountability structures that match the league it is becoming. Transparency around how referees are evaluated. Public acknowledgement when recurring patterns involving specific officials and specific players are being reviewed. A visible, credible process that communicates to fans, players, and coaches that these concerns are being taken seriously at the institutional level. Not as a PR exercise, not as damage control, but as a genuine upgrade to the professional standard the league is trying to establish. What this game actually tells us. So let us land this plane. The 87-78 final score was real. The 24 points and 9 assists were real. The win over the Sparks, Indiana moving to 1-1 on the season, was real. And the growth in Clark's game, the driving, the interior finishing, the expanding offensive repertoire was real. At the same time, the 16 turnovers were real. The questions about offensive structure and how the system integrates Clark after she initiates were real. The technical foul was real. And the bigger conversation it reopened about officiating, accountability, and how the WNBA handles the pressure that comes with being a growing league watched by millions of people who care deeply about what happens inside those lines. That conversation was very real. The Indiana Fever may end up being one of the best teams in the league this season. Caitlin Clark may end up having the most complete professional season of her career. Sophie Cunningham and Kelsey Mitchell and Aaliyah Boston and the rest of its roster have the pieces to make a genuine title run. The talent is not the question. The talent has never been the question. The question is whether all of those pieces get organized in a way that takes full advantage of the most dangerous weapon this franchise has. Whether the system gets calibrated around what Clark does best, rather than asking her to organize and create, and then watching the possessions end without her. Whether the turnovers come down before the schedule toughens and the margin for error disappears. And whether the league, in the middle of the most important commercial moment in its history, decides that these officiating questions deserve more than silence. Because here's the thing about Caitlin Clark that this game put on full display. She took the technical foul. She came back out in the second half. She scored 13 more points. She finished with 24-9. And after the game, She told reporters that the referees were doing a tremendous job, that she deserved the technical she received, and that she needed to be better in those moments. She said all of that with a straight face, having just finished one of her stronger performances of the early season. That is discipline. That is a player who has learned through experience exactly how to handle the public side of a very difficult, ongoing dynamic. She praised the officials. She accepted the blame. And then she went and produced a winning stat line anyway. But her grace in handling the aftermath does not erase the questions. It actually sharpens them. Because when the player at the center of the controversy continues to absorb it, manage it publicly, and keep producing, the scrutiny shifts entirely to the system around her, to the league, to the officiating, to the coaches, to the structure of the offense, to every element that shapes what she is able to do on a basketball court. And those questions do not disappear because Indiana got the win. They do not go away because the box score looked clean at the final buzzer. They sit in the middle of this franchise's identity, and they will keep sitting there until someone in a position of real institutional authority decides to address them with something more meaningful than a fine and a form letter. The Fever are good. They showed flashes of being very good in this win. But good is not the goal for a team with Caitlin Clark, Kelsey Mitchell, and Aaliyah Boston on the same roster. The goal is great, and the distance between where Indiana is right now and great runs directly through every single question we just went through together. So where do you stand? Drop your honest take in the comments below right now. Was that technical foul a justified call? Or does this look like the same old story dressed up in different packaging? Is the Indiana Fever offense quietly built more around Kelsey Mitchell than anyone wants to say out loud? And is the WNBA doing enough to protect its biggest star? Or is the league leaving her out to dry while collecting the revenue her presence generates? Hit the like button if this breakdown gave you something real to think about, because the algorithm needs to know that this kind of conversation has an audience. Subscribe if you want this level of analysis every time something important happens in women's basketball. And share this video with someone who cares about this sport, because the real conversation about the WNBA in 2026 is just getting started. See you on the next one.